Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Five9, and for this stock we actually have a pretty interesting structure, and I'm not even too focused on this being potentially a larger wave 1, potentially a wave A, but rather on the internal structure, as I am currently watching a potential 3-wave correction, an ABC pattern to be complete, and not only that, but from the current lows we have within this supposed wave 2 or whichever correction it may be, I am able to look for an initial confirmation. I am able to identify a potential initial 5-wave move to the upside. Now, before we head any further, I do want to highlight that this is a smaller cap stock. It's not a very high volume stock, and it will contain significantly more risk, as it generally is with stocks that can see even a 100% gain in, about 1 to 2 months, yeah? So, with all of those disclaimers laid down, for this stock, I am looking for a large wave 3 to ideally be information. Doesn't have to be a wave 3, it could be just a wave C, but based on the fact that we have 3 waves down into the area of support, we can look for an extension from a larger time frame perspective. We could be looking for an ideal target for the wave 3 to materialize within this very next wave to the upside at the 138.2% extension of the wave 1. That sits at around $3,900, but I do want to highlight that this is not the goal of the setup, while the long-term target would be even able to reach those levels. We aren't necessarily looking to be getting into a trade until it does. It could very well be the case that while we're building this wave 3 that would, once again, maybe reach those levels, maybe even exceed them, we could see significant corrections to happen even internally within this pattern, and we could be looking at many years before this wave 3 actually manages to reach that target. So for a more realistic outcome, we are instead looking for a smaller pattern to emerge. We are focusing on the smaller time frame, where I'm still able to look for quite decent returns, but within a much smaller period, without looking to actually give my returns back to the market as the larger corrections occur. So for this stock, I am tracking 5 waves up, and whenever we have price action that shows such a pattern, right, an initial 5-wave move to the upside, it is strongly suggested to us that after a 3-wave correction that forms a higher low, we can expect with high probabilities to see at the very least another 5-wave move to the upside. So we have one of those ideal setups potentially formed in the case of this chart, and all we really need to do is look for the wave 2 and for continuation to higher prices, ideally within a wave 3, potentially only within a wave C. So for me, the ideal pattern in the case of this stock would be something like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 to end up playing out, and generally within the wave 2, I strongly prefer for the 78.6% Fibonacci retracement to hold. I do not want to see a sustained break below that. Seeing it is actually an indication that the probabilities of this setup have been significantly damaged, that it may not end up working out in the end, and we would need to be looking for a different pattern for continuation to lower prices, and we really don't need to look too much beyond that. But yes, usually if we see the sustained break below the last level of support, which in the case of this stock is at $15.40, the probabilities strongly shift, and most of the time the setup doesn't end up working out. Then on the flip side, as long as these levels of support are still holding, the setup is just as promising in terms of probabilities. Now, in the case of this wave 1, I have to unfortunately track a leading diagonal. It's not the prettiest one, so it's not like a guarantee that we have this as an initial 5 move to the upside, but this is what we have in place. We are not dealing with predictions here, we are talking about probabilities, and in my opinion, right now, the probabilities are good enough to look for a setup. The execution will matter a lot more in the long term when such setups are identified than whether they are actual 5-wave patterns or not, because even if it isn't a 5-wave pattern, sometimes the structures can still extend to higher prices. But if you do not have a good execution, that will not end up mattering anyway. It will not matter if it's a 3-wave pattern, if it's a 5-wave pattern, because execution is key. Now, I want to start by mentioning that this wave 2 having a bottom in is a realistic possibility, but it's not a guarantee, and we certainly have to look for a potential extension, as if I actually zoom in within the 1 hour time frame, I would have probably an easier time reading a 5-wave pattern within this orange wave A as opposed to a 3-wave pattern in this descent. This would mean, especially as long as we do not get a sustained break above the levels of resistance for a wave B, which also go up to the 78.6% retracement, $24.70, there would be actually a decent amount of risk that we will see one additional low within the wave C. And yes, I can see that we have gotten the break above the levels of resistance, but it's not a sustained break. This has barely been one push and a daily close above these levels, and it could be very easily the case that we will not see a successful breakthrough. But yeah, if we go into the smaller time frame, I can definitely track this as a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. Be aware of that, but it's not a guarantee that we will see continuation to lower prices. It could be that the wave 1 really topped here within a slightly different pattern, and then this is an ABC structure. And in that scenario, we would need extensions lower, and the structure would actually still be able to push even higher. But again, this does not really matter as long as we have proper execution. And in the case of this structure, one thing to watch out for before we look at the actual setup, we are looking for the ideal target of the wave C to have a good chance of being reached in the case of this structure, which is perfectly in line with the 61.8% retracement at $17.35. If we are to see this wave C form, yeah, it is a 5-wave pattern, it will likely end up reaching those levels, and we will have our wave 2 reset within this area. I do not know whether we will see this wave 2 reset or not, and for that reason I am tracking the levels of support that would be most important for direct continuation to higher prices. And in the case of this stock, the structure that I'm tracking in this move up would likely have to imply this being a double 1-2 setup, in the case of a successful breakout of course, and then this would be the wave 3. In this case, I'd be watching out for a wave 4 correction, a wave 5, and another 4-5 pattern to complete this as a larger 5-wave move to the upside. So for now, I'm looking strictly at the internal structure in a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, and as long as we hold the internal levels of support for a correction within a wave 4, we can look still for continuation to higher prices, whereas if we see a failure to hold these levels of support, it would imply a good amount of risk that we will see the orange scenario play out instead, that this wave 2 doesn't have a bottom in, that we are looking for the reset, that we are looking for the orange wave C to likely form. Those levels extend down to the 50% retracement at $23.08, and yes, if we see the sustained break below that, it would be most likely the case that we are within the orange wave C. Not a guarantee, other patterns could still work out to higher prices, but it would be an exponentially more difficult pattern to trade. Now, to be honest, this setup, this internal structure, is probably not a good fit for most people. It would require a more experienced execution to be had within such a setup, because already within this wave 4, we have reached the 38.2% retracement. That's not a problem, it's even the ideal target for the wave 4, but the proportions of this as a wave 2 and this as a wave 4 do not match yet. So most likely, this white wave 4 would require a larger correction to form. And it definitely can still end up working out. I would be watching out for such an opportunity, but I just wanted to highlight that for most people, it would generally be better to either wait for the wave 2 reset, for the white wave 2 to be reset within the orange wave C, or to see more clarity within this move up. Now, of course, this is not my call to make, this is not financial advice, but I do warn you of the possibility of this simply being an ABC pattern within the orange wave B, and especially if we see the break below $23, that would be a signal really for anyone that this structure has a significantly higher chance of failure. Now, going into the smaller time frame, we don't get too much information unfortunately, and sure, we could even see an extension within this white wave tree, where a bottom could already be in within an internal wave 4, but we simply cannot have too much trust within such a small time frame. So for now, this is about it from me. We will stop here, but if you want even more, you can check out the Patreon. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and if you enjoyed the content and want to support it directly, check out the channel membership, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.